conversations that we were having with agencies all across the country, that there was changes occurring in the maritime public safety environment, especially as it relates to the management of fleets. And as we dug deeper into it, we felt that it was necessary not only to write a white paper, which we'll reference here in a little bit, but also to have this type of roundtable discussion. What I hope is this is the first of many. We want to just reach out to some key leaders in the country and really validate what we think is going on and what we see happening, and most importantly, see how we can assist those agencies in what they're doing. So, as I described, it's a roundtable discussion. We want it to be an open discussion. All throughout this, you can use the chat to ask questions or make comment. I'll act as the facilitator, if you will, and make sure that we're answering your questions as they're asked, or interject if necessary. If we're down a particular pathway, we'll stay on that pathway to answer your questions and make sure that we resolve it. This is an open discussion, and it's an opportunity to have cross communications that we don't usually have. Rarely in this maritime public safety world do you have the opportunity to talk with each other about some of the challenges that you're having, specifically as they relate to your procurement efforts, your platform management efforts, your life cycle efforts of your equipment. So that's what we want to promote here. That's what we want to foster. And how this will work, like I said, if you have questions, just ask them in the chat. I'll be monitoring them as we go forward. And at the end, we'll leave an opportunity to have any open discussions. Our goal is to make this no longer than 60 minutes. If we go over, it would primarily be because questions you're asking, and we want to make sure that we answer them before we end. We'll look at an overview of the current manufacturing market. We'll look at some emerging trends. We'll look at how technology's impacting your bottom line. We'll leave that open discussion period, like I said. We'll look at a couple of case studies, and we'll look at some programs that we've designed, hopefully, to meet your particular needs. As I said, I'm Mark DuPont. That's a shiny picture there, so you know what I look like in case you don't know who I am. And John Hotz, like I said, is our assistant director. He is a recognized industry veteran. I think it's important. His value to what he's going to share with us comes from a host of engagements that he's had over the years, not just from a platform manufacturer perspective, but also with equipment that people wear, equipment that you put on your boats, and technologies that impact officer safety. All of these things are part of John's background, and that's why he's such a critical part to this discussion. So as we move forward here, just a little bit about the Academy. This is the commercial that every web-based presentation has in it. The Academy is 17 years old, and in its infancy, it was formed by a former Coast Guard commandant, and his goal was to produce tailored and customized solutions for the state and local market. He felt that there was a big gap between what the Coast Guard was getting for training, what some of the federal agencies were getting through FLETC, and he wanted to make sure that the state and locals had access to the same type of training. We're a nonprofit organization committed to serving those who are in service to others. And we're also approaching our solutions from a whole of community approach. Whole of community not only includes the local, county, state, federal law enforcement, it also includes public safety, it also includes military, and it also includes industry. That's a big part of the equation. We think, John and I both feel that that's been overlooked in the past, and we need to act as the conduit, the hub, if you will, the bridge between industry and the deck plate level, the users. So that's an important aspect of what the Academy is about. And in 2017, our board, through a strategic plan that they authorized, want to make sure that we are a membership-driven organization. So we became member-oriented. We now have the ability to talk, and just let me do a verification here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good check, because I just got a text saying, "Are you on?" From John, nonetheless. So we're a membership-driven organization. We became that, like I said, this year, actually just last month. And part of that is to make sure we're connected to the deck plate level. Part of that is to make sure that we stay in tune with what the needs of the officers at that level are and the agencies and organizations that they work for. And we are response coordinators. In other words, we want to know what your gap is. The gap doesn't necessarily always have to be about procurement or platforms or technologies. It could be about training. Obviously, we're an academy. That's one of the strengths of the organization, one of our specialties. It could be in grant acquisition. It could be in making selection of evaluation criteria. All these things are important elements to the process. And so we want to make sure that we're the coordinators of those responses for you. And most importantly, we want to provide services that we think have really never been provided. And this Roundtable is an example of that. We haven't had in the past the opportunity to sit down and communicate with key representatives of the community and talk about what their issues are and then develop solutions tailored to those solutions, to those problems. So this is an important element of what we do. What we are not mandated by the Coast Guard or another federal agency or a state directive. As I said, we're not married to a particular vendor. We're not salespeople or peddlers. We're problem solvers. We are not in competition with organizations like NASBLA or other type of organizations. We're in a very separate lane and dealing with the key issues that are relevant to your particular community. When talking with Texas and Cody about some of their particular issues, we started by writing a white paper targeting that particular issue, but what it quickly evolved into is looking at the whole of community again, and what are these changing issues as they relate to public safety and maritime law enforcement in particular. What's that changing landscape? And John, if you made it, I'll let you pick up the ball here. I see you're online and I assume you've got connectivity.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. You sound like a Verizon commercial.
All right, that's excellent. Yes, thank you very much for everybody being here. I'm very excited about having an opportunity to talk to you guys about this in the next phase of where we're ready to go. Mark and I, a while back, saw the need to develop a white paper. We saw the fact that there was a lot of changing going on out there, technology changing, the world was changing, political priorities were changing, and we needed to quickly address this change and bring it up to you guys. And so what we did is we wrote a white paper that talked about the changing seascape and what we're in. In that white paper, we covered people, platforms, processes, and procurement. And I think each one of those different things is being affected by the changes that we're in. And I think that if we ignore this change, we're being remiss. At one point in time, I remember years ago, I was told by an old fellow that was a friend of mine, he says, the key to all my problems is how I accept them. And I've found the fact that if I don't accept that the world, the generations, the technology is changing faster than I better keep pace or I'm going to get left behind. So as we discuss what the NMLEA is all about and what we bring to offer to you, I think you'll find it clear that we're really focusing on educating you, your people, through training, consulting. We offer a valuable inside corporate intel to you, a little bit about your suppliers, your equipment providers, and I think we can help you with the processes, which ultimately is going to affect your overall performance of your agency. This includes things like your agency's needs assessments, processes, the equipment selection, the outfitting of the way you outfit your equipment, you select your equipment, and even the acquisition or the manufacturer's turnover process. So, Mark, you can talk a little bit about the people in the next slide.
Sure, I'd love to take this part because I think it's the most vital part of the 4 Ps as it relates to public safety in any business in the United States. The first and most important point, it's usually the largest and most expensive and the most challenging element of management. And I'm sure everybody on this call in their supervisory role, leadership role, will attest to this. People just occupy a lot of our time. And what's happening right now is we're losing institutional knowledge. Baby boomers are retiring at the rate of 10,000 a day. That's a national statistic. And it's especially affecting law enforcement, and especially maritime law enforcement. And so what's happening is the way we've done things for the last 5, 10, or 15 years, the people that helped develop those programs, those processes, those policies are walking out the door. And agencies all across the country are struggling with how do we replace that? And what's entering the workforce is these new millennials. They currently occupy about 40% of the workforce on a national level, but in law enforcement, that number jumps way over 70%. And because that workforce dynamic is changing, they have a very different approach to work. And because they have a different approach to work and what they do in their careers, they require a different training approach. Unfortunately, we're locked in the past. We're doing things that I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, going through the academy. We're using training programs that were developed by us or people even before us. And we're wondering why the outcome is different, wondering why that change is occurring and we're not getting the same type of results as we did 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So add to this that these same agencies that are struggling with this new millennial workforce, they're also struggling with diversity and recruitment issues. I was with a particular agency that'll go unnamed a few months ago. I was there on a Friday, and their colonel was frustrated because the governor's office had just ordered him to shut down their academy class that was scheduled to begin on Monday. And the principal reason that that class was getting shut down was because there was no diversity in that recruit class. And so part of the struggle is, okay, I don't have that diversity, but I'm having an equally challenging experience in just trying to recruit people to begin with. So how do we balance that? You know, what's the next step? Unfortunately, we're in what I like to call a perfect storm. Having been in the perfect storm, I can attest to this to some degree. But we have a decreasing level of knowledge and skills because that institutional knowledge has walked out the door. So I have younger people now in positions of management or supervision. I have increase in operational requirements. We're getting more and more tasks put on top of us. We have this changing dynamic in the workforce. I have a decreasing pool to draw from to attract to my agency. And all the while, I have the challenge to keep up with these particular challenges. So look at it from this perspective. As the average tenure of your department decreases, the people in positions of responsibility have less experience. So when it comes to something like procurement, I'm now in a situation where I have a lieutenant or a captain that has significantly less years on the job in that position to lead or manage that acquisition process. And I'm wondering why, at the end of the day, those acquisitions aren't actually fitting what my needs were and what my requirements were. So let's look at that from the perspective of platforms and products. What's going on out there? Well, if you look at what's going on in the aluminum manufacturing sector, if you look at what's going on in fiberglass, and you look at what's going on in recreational, there are different components, but they all lead to the same thing. What's going on in the aluminum manufacturing business is that there are big contracts that are getting awarded by the federal government. And what happens to you as a state agency, local agency, or county organization when you go to get your platform in the queue, if you will, to get manufactured, you're getting put to the back of the line. And that's primarily because they've got this big order for 30, 50, 60, 100 platforms, and or for bigger platforms. So when you step in and want your 1 or 2 or 3 boats to be manufactured, unfortunately, you're just not a high priority. You're going to go to the back of that line. And a lot of you are experiencing this particular phenomena. In the fiberglass world, what's driving that is actually recreational boating sales. So you have a situation where the market is just growing exponentially in the recreational segment. And so more people are using that dispersible income, and they're buying more boats. So the recreational manufacturers or commercial manufacturers who also manufacture recreational boats are devoting most of their resources to those recreational sales. And for obvious reasons, it's just more money. So you actually have organizations, manufacturers that were building a new manufacturing facility for commercial boats, upon its completion, are changing its mission and focusing it purely on recreational boat manufacturing so that they can keep up with demand. Those are the most evident examples of how this is affecting your particular procurement efforts. So we have an emerging trend here. And what that emerging trend is about purpose-built boats and away from recreational boats. And the question is why, and where does this leave you? So with that, I'm going to leave it over to John, or hand it over to John. John, you're up.
So the process, where are we? So how does it affect everything? I think when you look at the new styles of boats in the new types of equipment that's out there, the question is it a good value to you, and is it actually worth using? Is it working? And I think when you look at the kind of technology out there, it represents change, but it represents a significant increase in your ownership costs. You look at fly-by-wire controls of $12,000, multifunction HD navigation systems with wireless systems in them. You have laptops, thermal imaging FLIR cameras, polyurethane main collar systems. All this technology is moving very, very fast. And the boat, if you noticed, I didn't talk about the boat. That's just the equipment that's going in it. With all that change that's happening and all this new technology, everybody's in a race to beat it. So by the time you get your boat ordered, often a lot of the stuff that you get is out of date and over. It's gone. And so I think it's a question of how do we find a good balance. But it is a massive expense in your equipment. So if you go to the next one, the next slide, Mark, the opportunity to do this is by developing a set of standards. And when I say standards, I don't necessarily mean a standard platform of a boat. I mean the standards that you build into your boat. Standards of the type of electrical systems, the type of towing systems. Do you have the right lighting in every one of the boat, and where you put those things in the boat? If you look at the big agency, I guess that everybody is obviously going to say, when you see in our world, why did the Coast Guard move over to standards and away from a non-standard fleet? It's because ultimately the cost was prohibitive. They developed standards for each class of their boats, for each purpose of their boat, and they didn't necessarily standardize the manufacturer, but they standardized where everything was equipped, how it was equipped, what was on the boat, for the purposes of it being a return on investment issue, an officer safety issue, a public issue, and it's less about boats and more about the equipment and the placement and the way that this stuff is outfitted. Mark, you can talk a little bit more to how the Coast Guard moved in that direction and what the benefits they got from person and personnel purpose.
Sure. You know, it's the best example of, well, first, we all can sit back and like them or hate them. The good part about the Coast Guard is they are very systematic in how they do things, and it makes them good at what they do. They create systems for a lot of different things, sometimes too much, some would think. But one of the things is standardization, and standardization beyond, as John said, beyond just the boat. One of the best ways that this illustrates its successfulness is Hurricane Katrina, and then, of course, most recently, Harvey and Irma and Maria. One of the things that got such notoriety for the Coast Guard is they were able to take teams of people from all parts of the country that never met each other before, land them in New Orleans, put them on an aircraft or on a boat, send them out to do their mission, and they did it flawlessly. No one needed any deck plate training about what button did what or where this particular gear was stored. They went out and they saved thousands of people. How this translates to the state and local world is, do you have a situation where you have different types of platforms? And do your officers on occasion go from one platform to another? And is there likelihood that that officer in a boat that he doesn't normally operate find himself in an emergency situation where he needs, I don't know, a fire extinguisher, or he needs emergency medical assistance equipment, or he needs to go to his gun rack, or whatever those things are, the time we take in having that officer trying to figure out where that is stored on that boat, as opposed to becoming a routine habit, take away from the time that he can use to save someone's life or apply his particular skill to the situation. So standardization has much more to it than just the return on investment, although that's a highlight, and that's why a lot of people go to it. It's more than that, and it's more than just the boats. So I said this was going to be a discussion, this was going to be a roundtable, and what we're looking for, and not necessarily to shout it out right now, I just want you to think about these questions as we continue on here and maybe talk about it at the end. But what is your biggest challenge? If we had to stop right now and say, listen, we're going to sprinkle magic dust on it, and the number one issue you have is going to go away. So tell me what that number one issue is, and we'll figure out a solution to it. But you only get one. Tell me what the biggest one is. What would that be? Or asked another way, what is your biggest need? What do you need that you lack right now? And it doesn't have to be all about a boat, or it doesn't all have to be about a particular capability. It could be about people. It could be about a capability that you don't have that you want to have. And then another thought provoker is, how is your acquisition working? How does that system work? Are there flaws or problems with that system? And where are they, or what are they? You may not be able to answer that. You might just say, yes, we have a problem with our acquisition, but we can't really figure out what the root of that is, or point to a specific thing. My answer to that is often it's about capacity versus capability. You might have a situation where you have the total capacity to do something. You have the people, you have the tools, but you might not have the capability to do it because your people aren't trained appropriately to do it. Oftentimes, it falls into one of these 4 P categories, right? It's people, it's about the procurement, it's about process, or it's about performance. And often it's more than one. You might start by pointing at the people thing, saying, I lack the people in my acquisition process or in that department to make the right decisions, to give us the right platforms to do our job. Okay, well, listen to what I just said. Although I was focused on the people, I actually unveiled a procurement problem, and I unveiled a process problem, and I unveiled a performance problem, all in the same statement. And typically, whatever problem area you have, even though it may be focused on one thing, it's going to affect performance. So I'll pick on Florida for a moment, because Mark, you're on the phone. You have people. Florida Fish and Wildlife is the largest of its kind in the world, with over 800 sworn people. So you have capacity, but do you have the capability? Is it happening where in your procurement efforts, you're getting kind of backed into a corner with manufacturers because you can't get the exact tool that you want and the resources you want because of all the points I was making earlier about what's going on in the aluminum market, the fiberglass market, and the recreational market, and how that's impacting you. In Texas, is it a staff issue? I don't have. It's a people problem. So I don't have the capacity, and there's a lack of connectivity to that manufacturing segment. Meaning, I go back to the people part, where we're promoting people into positions that maybe don't have the depth of experience that our older folks had when they left and they retired. So we're putting them in a position where they really don't understand the business side of the manufacturing segment. They don't understand what they should be asking or requiring in their procurement process. And so you end up getting something that a year or two down the road is dissatisfactory. And why? It's not meeting what the actual operational requirements were. And so, what was that? Was that a procurement process? It's definitely a performance issue now, but the root of it might be in the people part of it and what skills they had or what they didn't have. In Washington State, you have the capacity to build. You have a lot of boat companies out there building great boats out there. But in Washington's issue, they do not have a established standard to ensure that the counties are getting the right platforms to do the mission that the state wants them to do over a period of time. So the root of it is a process issue. They definitely got the capacity to build, but the capability isn't making its way out there onto the water. So they all end up, like I said, coming down to a performance issue. So what do you do? Okay, great, Mark and John, you gave us a great example of all the problems we know that might already exist within our agency. How do you fix this? So what you need is navigational assistance, right? Sorry for the pun, but I had to use it. We're in the boat business. We're in the maritime law enforcement world. The way to get that assistance is trying to replace that institutional knowledge internally is difficult. So you can outsource and find those subject matter experts to help guide you and your organization through the maze. And that SME expertise can be specific. In other words, your problem might be in training. I'm just picking that because that's my world of work. And we just need to augment our training staff or give them better guidance and direction in meeting the needs of this millennial market workforce that we're dealing with right now. So that may be the type of SME that you request and that the Academy provides to you. Or it's back to the procurement. You want someone that understands the manufacturing side of things, the industry side of it, the business side of it, understands what they'll be asking for, understand what drives them to answer your needs, and they'll give you that guidance. So it's usually specific. It's kind of like, when you get an illness and go to the hospital, they infinitely want you to go to a specialist, right, based on what that particular issue is. Well, we're kind of saying the same thing. And part of what we want to do, and we'll talk about it here briefly, is two programs that we think address these core issues. And the first one is the STAR program. John?
Yeah, the STAR program, it's a product evaluation program, is the best way to say it, for equipment and technology to be reviewed, assessed, evaluated, and vetted by the community veterans. When I say community veterans, I say the guys who are in the field using them, the guys that are at the senior level that have to look forward as to what they need for equipment to be able to push the limits of what they've been doing in the past. And one of the challenges that I've seen in this industry as I've traveled the country, even traveled the world, is a lot of equipment that is out there is used on a regional basis, and it doesn't filter its way back through the entire community. And so probably as I was battling through my computer problems here, you probably heard Mark talk about how we develop a platform to allow the community or the officers and the field staff and the people that are in the management roles inside of this to communicate with government or with industry rather, is we develop a program, and we've called it the STAR program. Essentially what it is, like I said, it's a product consumer review program. And it starts with a very simple thing. A company will either be referred to us by you. You may tell a company, look, we're interested in a product that you have, but it needs to go through the STAR program at NMLEA, and they're going to help you get your product up to where it needs to be. So they submit it to us for selection. We look at it. What we'll do is we'll develop a process as to where it's going to go out to. We'll put together the training team. that is, or the evaluation team, the test and evaluation team, will establish a timeline for these guys. We'll establish a logistics process of moving it around and shipping the equipment back and forth to the people that need to see it. We'll give this all to that company. And then what will happen is we're going to perform with our evaluators, and our evaluators are chosen based on the product. It may be a senior level guy, maybe a guy out in the field that has never even touched this stuff, and we want him to see it, to see if it's simple enough. So we're going to evaluate it for its capabilities, its applicability. Does it perform a chore or a task that it was supposed to do? How effective does it function for the operation that we think it needs? A lot of that is information that's going to go to the company to help the company bring the right product to the marketplace before it ever gets to the marketplace. So next training, next slide, Mark. Then we're going to do the field evaluation team is going to look really at a series of things called functionality. Did it work? Does it do what it says it's going to do? Is it effective? Is the interface simple? And we're going to feed that field training review back to the company as we move along. Go ahead, Mark. Next slide. And this is what you're going to see when you dial into this program. Basically, is would we, this community, recommend this to anyone in our agency? It's going to be based on a scale of like 1 to 10. 10 being absolutely, it's a great product, 1 being probably not. The product availability, is the company registered as a vendor? Is the product readily on the market and out in the field? Is that good, or could it improve? Is the company vendor just not up to steam across the board? That'll be a rating process. Lifecycle cost, is it a good value for you guys over the long run? Is it durable, functional in a government marketplace? Is it game warden proof, as a lot of times I've heard said? Is it market priced to a point where we know you guys can afford it? $15,000 binoculars is probably not going to happen in the marketplace. And then what's the technology lifespan? How long is it going to last? Is that a 10 or is that a 2? I remember the days of a lot of guys buying tow fishes. They bought these tow fishes and the technology was antiquated within 2 years, and there was $10,000, $15,000 at a pop. If somebody else had done some of that research, it might have saved a lot of money spent on the other person's side, from the other side of the marketplace. And then what's the company support? Do they have internal support? Do they have a good customer service process? Do they have the ability to service? Are they outsourcing their service, or are they doing it inside? And then a past performance history that we'd research through some of the people that are currently using this type of product. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to be able to come back with a final review that you guys can look at and the company can utilize as how does it impact the operations of the field staff. We're going to post those findings, and if it's an authorized and we feel it's an all-star product, we're going to put our approval on it. And this is not like other products you've seen in the past, where if they pay us enough in our marketing efforts that this is going to work. This is a real-time evaluation process that is needed. In almost everything out there that you look for, technology, equipment, in the recreational, the consumer market, there's consumer reports. There isn't one in this marketplace. Cody mentioned this a long time ago. It's desperately needed, and I think this is a process where we as a community will grow. And as a community, I mean the industry as well as the government and users are going to grow immensely in our capabilities by having a process like this. So the next one that we came up with and we feel is going to be very applicable is more of a consulting service for you guys. We call it a fleets program. It covers fleet cycle, life cycle costing, equipment design, evaluation criteria, acquisition processes, training, and sustainment. You may not need all of those. You may only need 1, 2, 3 of those things. But it's a program that we'll offer that'll cover from top to bottom for you guys that are being challenged with manpower issues and maybe struggling to keep up you know, to the new changing environment that we're in right now. It's a great program. So keep moving, Mark, as you go through this one. So the fleet, it's a fleet life cycle. One of the aspects of it, like I said, it's broken out into a series of different consulting group of things that we can offer you. When you look at fleet life cycle management, it's important that you manage your maritime assets. And it means a lot more than simply buying them. It's a whole life cycle approach that's going to ensure that you spend your dollars wisely and that your equipment operates at a level that is going to be effective. It's addressing this particular management life cycle consulting process that we would work with you. It's going to help you look at your total life cycle cost of that investment. How you look at buying all these boats. Are they going to last for a long time? And what is going to be the predictable life cycle cost that you need to budget for to keep these things operational? This is where we offer the ability to consider you guys to look at something outside of the norm. In the past, you know, most agencies have gone to existing vendors who have a product that will work just good for you. It'll be adequate for you. Instead, agencies are starting to see the advantages, especially as you get into the aluminum, of you actually designing your own product. If you're going to buy a bunch of boats and you're going to standardize your categories, why not build the boat that works best for you? Why buy somebody else's design, pay for somebody else's marketing and everything? And with that, we have the ability to go out there and work with engineering teams with the foremost technology in design engineering products that are actually not that expensive when you look at a long-term acquisition of multiple boats or a big boat. And we have some really great engineering firms that are out there. These guys have the ability through Ship Constructor and other different types of technology to build a virtual boat that you would give them a cut file, and you could take one of these small manufacturers that you may be worried about his technology, but you feel good about his dedication and his desire to work with you. You could actually give him a pre-designed platform with all the standards already created, and he just is your builder for you. So that's one option that we can work for you. We can help you design equipment that your needs are. Then the other thing that we do, and I've done over the past, and I know Mark knows about this program, Cody's seen me do it, it's an equipment assessment and evaluation of needs. And what we'll do is we'll go out there and work with a defined team to interview your staff, your field staff, and either assess the existing equipment to see how applicable it is now, whether it's worth just replacing it or it's worth taking it up to the next level, or should we go out there and look for a suitable a replacement for it. I've done this successfully over a 30-year career, and that's to go out in the field, look at the product, ride on the product, learn about the product, come back with a reasonable expectation of what your needs are, bring that out to the table, and then what we can do is help you find the people who are suitable to be able to do that and replace that. And build a program in there that you can repeat. So maybe this is a program where we put this process down. We I guess, blaze the path for you to be able to have a repetitious program down the road of how you evaluate your equipment and everything. So moving to the next slide. And then the next thing that we have the ability to do is work with you is develop a product strategy or a procurement strategy, how you buy it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a bid spec come out, and it says 17-foot center console, fiberglass patrol boat with outboard engine and trailer. And I feel bad every time I see that when it comes out as to what the officer is going to get, because that opens the door to every single bottom feeder in the world. So developing a strategy is to work with you once you've defined the product that you want. And I don't care whether it's a boat or it's an airplane or it's a drone. Develop what the key specifications are. So you're going to get an equivocal, a product that's going to do the job that you need to do. We're going to make sure that all the justification documents are in place with you. We're going to make sure that it meets the procurement laws and agency policy. And we're going to make sure to see maybe it's available on state budget or contract. And make sure that the proposals and the bid spec is written in a way that when it goes up to procurement, it goes up out of your department into the actual buying department inside of your agency. If it needs to go that way, it's going to be packaged in a way that you guys are going to get as close to the best things you need. So moving on.
So
go ahead, Mark, you take it from here.
yeah, so based on that, we just threw a lot of information at you in 45 minutes here, but I think what the intent here is to give you some thought provokers about your particular world and what is your biggest challenge. I go back to that question I asked before. What area do you feel you have the biggest gap in, and what is your most urgent need? And what we hope is through this discussion process, whether we share it here, whether we talk now, all the lines are open, you guys can talk openly. Whether we talk about it here, it's about what's that next step? How can we help you? How can we ultimately bring the solution and tailor the solution that's unique to your needs? And that's what this is all about. We wanted to give you some background into why we're preaching what we're preaching. There's some science behind it. Those of you that know me well, that I always like to base it on some sort of factual data points. And these problems that we're seeing, also create some opportunities there for you to achieve what you want to achieve for your organization or for your agency. It just requires a little bit of guidance to steer your people, your organization in the right pathway, and we think we can provide that for you. So any big challenges that we didn't cover or that were relevant to your particular world of work, or do we want to keep it confidential? We don't want to open up our kimono too far and let people know what's really going on internally. Any comments, questions, or challenges? Okay, nothing heard. John, do you want to bring it in for a landing? Is there anything else that we missed in this, and anything else that you want to follow up with?
I think this is a unique opportunity for you guys to see that what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that platform that we discussed in the very beginning, and that's be able to open the discussions up from east to west, north to south, bring a better product and advance the community's capabilities. And I, as well as Mark, I've been in this industry for 30 years, and I've been out there selling to everybody everything that I can ever sell. Now I'm in a situation where I don't have to sell anymore. What I want to do is just be an advocate. What we want to be able to be is somebody that can bring to you real-time experience. We can bring you a capability that maybe your agency doesn't have right now, and probably isn't going to invest in, and that's going to allow you to stay ahead of this rapid technology growth that's out there right now, and do it in an affordable way. I look at a lot of you guys out there, and you're climbing your career ladders, and I know, and I've seen it time and time again, and I'm sure you're all nodding your head. One critical mistake, being asked to do something that maybe you guys aren't really trained to do, can affect generations to come inside of your agency. And we want to help you mitigate that. I've seen it happen time and time again. This is a time with the type of technology that's out there and the speed of which everything is running at right now, is we all need help. We all need to work together in order to be able to advance the capabilities of this community. You're seeing this from an LE standpoint, but I can tell you that the Navy, the Air Force, the military, they're doing the same thing that we're doing here. They're out there developing focus groups, and they're working to be able to bring back a relationship, that is cross-generational, and it's also throughout the entire community as a whole. So I babble a lot, so I hope I didn't over-talk myself here.
No, we hit the time right on the nose there, John. We're at 1:59. So I thank you guys for participating. You guys know how to reach us. Hopefully we've lit a spark here, and we hope that we can provide some specific answers to your unique problems, and we look forward to conversations in the future. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, guys. We appreciate it.